What's the most iconic highlight that comes to mind when you think of Michael Jordan? Is it this one?
Jordan with the drive and the reverse. Grady with an uptake. Driving. Oh!
Maybe this one.
Oh! Came back. Nick Young with a nice move. Reverse layup.
Or how about this one?
This is like this move is reserved for somebody.
Yes, that is Grayson Allen, a man who almost has a full head of gray hair at 29, performing a layup that made people think MJ was an actual god. The NBA today is just a little different from the NBA 30 years ago. I know that shouldn't be a controversial take, but for some reason fans continually try and compare completely different eras with the same lens. The clip of Grayson Allen hitting this reverse layup has brought this conversation up once again. But see, the thing is, we're not just comparing basketball players anymore. We're comparing decades of evolution in athleticism, training, and even the very game itself. Back in the 90s, Jordan was a physical anomaly, a once-in-a-generation athlete who could seemingly defy gravity and logic. But before him, you needed a Dr. J to set the groundwork for what was possible in the NBA, and ultimately gave MJ the blueprint for what was possible in his own career. Fast forward to today, and you've got a league full of guys with insane physical tools that draw from past players and how they developed their game. But now they have access to world-class training and nutrition that would make the players in the 90s drop their jaw in shock. So when we talk about comparing MJ's highlights to role players of today, it feels like we're missing the bigger picture. But let's be real, today's athletes aren't just athletes. They're ultimately products of years of science, technology, and resources that help players hit new heights as the resources for players in the league continue to grow. So is it really fair to hold MJ's greatness against the context of today's game? Or is it time to recognize that the game has evolved in ways we can't ignore? Let's dive into why this whole era comparison debate might not be as valid as we may think. Let's start with something simple, just the resources available for today's players compared to back in the 90s. Back then, the most advanced training a player could get was from their team's coach or maybe a personal trainer. Fast forward to now and you've got entire teams of sports scientists, nutritionists, physiotherapists, and biomechanics experts working with every top tier player. The money and time spent on keeping players healthy and at peak performance today is insane. Think about it, players like LeBron James spend millions of dollars on their bodies. They're getting tailored workout routines, recovery regimens, and diet plans that were unheard of in Jordan's time. MJ played through some injuries that would have kept a lot of players out today, but that was more of a necessity than an option. Today's players can avoid those type of injuries with modern technique and advanced preventative care. Just look at how much attention is being paid toward injury prevention and all of the ways players can combat it. And beyond just the health of it all, the tools that are available for training is in abundance. They say white guys can't jump, but I'm pretty sure we're sciencing our way out of that one. And I think sometimes we take for granted how insanely athletic some of these guys are. We downplay other eras calling them plumbers, but those guys back then are still insane athletes. But what we are witnessing today is not human. These guys are insane, and as fans we shouldn't take for granted and forget how impressive these athletes today actually are. And then you move on to something that Jordan himself debatably had a hand in contributing to, and that's bringing the game on a more international level. After the '92 Dream Team took the world by storm, many kids were in awe of MJ and wanted to be just like him, spreading up many basketball programs all around the world. And now the game has truly extended to every corner of the world. Even in the NBA, it's been 6 years since an American has won the MVP award. When Michael Jordan was dominating the league, the NBA wasn't as global as it is today. Sure, there were international players like Drazen Petrovic and Hakeem Olajuwon, but the overwhelming majority of talent came from the US and Canada. Well, today, as mentioned, we have players coming from all over the world. Luka Doncic in Slovenia, Giannis Antetokounmpo in Greece, and Joel Embiid from Cameroon. The world is producing an unprecedented amount of basketball talent, and the NBA is now truly a global league. You can't tell me that it's not changing the game. It's not just about the US now. Kids are growing up in Africa, Europe, South America, and Asia with the same access to training, coaching, and opportunity that kids in America had 30 years ago. The influx of international players has raised the overall level of talent. More players, more competition, and a higher baseline of skill, making today's NBA much more athletic and diverse in comparison to MJ's time. Next up, fans need to give Michael Jordan the credit he deserves for being a trailblazer. MJ was the first to truly push the envelope when it came to athleticism in the NBA. Before him, guys like Larry Bird and Magic Johnson were great, but they didn't have these same physical tools that Jordan brought to the table. Jordan revolutionized the game with his vertical leap, speed, and agility. He showed the world what elite athleticism in basketball could really look like. And so here's the thing, MJ had to walk so today's players could run. He laid the foundation for what we see today. He pushed the boundaries of athleticism, but today's players are taking those principles and building upon them with even more advanced training, technology, and medicine. Without Michael Jordan, we wouldn't have the LeBrons, the Zions, and the Giannis's that we have today. These players are standing on Michael Jordan's shoulders. So when we compare MJ to today's athletes, we're not just comparing him to his contemporaries, we're comparing him to athletes who were able to use his groundwork as a launching pad. And the final reason for why comparing different eras to today's game isn't entirely fair. The game has completely changed tactically. In the 90s, the game was much more physical, focused on post-up isolation plays and mid-range jumpers. Although we're seeing aspects of that returning, today's game is much more reliant on the three-point shot. Teams are shooting more threes than ever before, thanks to Steph Curry completely redefining the game with their emphasis on perimeter shooting and spacing. Teams now focus on spreading the floor, ball movement, and as we mentioned, spacing. And the emphasis from mid-range has now shifted to maximizing offensive efficiency with the three-point shot. It's not just a change in style, it's a fundamental change in how the game is played. The three-point shot has become the great equalizer. Back in MJ's time, a player like him could dominate with a mid-range game, but today players have to adjust a system where long-range shooting reigns supreme. This is part of the reason why some of today's players are putting up numbers that would have been unimaginable in MJ's time. So comparing Jordan's mid-range dominance to the three-point centric game of today is comparing apples to oranges. To sum it all up, stop trying to compare things that can't be compared. Calling players from Jordan's era plumbers is pretty pointless. Do you think that there was just a secret stash of 2016 Warriors just kicking around back then? No, the guys playing at the top level of the game in the 90s were the best available. It might not look the best when you're watching it in 2025, but you gotta keep in mind the game had to go through that to get to where we are now. I'm pretty sure if you had a player that was pulling off half the things Kyrie pulls out in a game during the 90s, they would have started up these Salem witch trials again. We are truly living in a blessed era of basketball, where athleticism is peaking off the charts and teams are having to find more and more creative ways to finish out games. Instead of downplaying former eras, we should just appreciate the game we have now.